So there's quite a lot of excitement, but also a bit of anxiousness. Excited because I'm going to be driving a Maserati Levante. Anxious because we're going to be doing it in Langkawi. First flight in 2 years, guys. I don't know what to feel about this. Here it is, our companion for the next 2 days, the Maserati Levante S. Don't you just love how Italian cars look? They've already got the engines running. I'm not sure if you can hear the V6 rumble. Oh. Now, let's get on board. Such a typical Italian car. Look at all the colors, the way everything is designed, the carbon fiber trims. Ooh, look at that. Alright guys, now that lunch is over, I brought the car to a quiet spot by the sea to show you a little bit of the car's exterior and interior. So for those of y'all who are unaware, the Maserati Levante has actually been in Malaysia since around 2018, so this look is actually quite a familiar one. But for this model update, there are actually a few changes on the exterior, starting with the grille. The grille design actually replicates the Alfieri concept, and we all know how cool that looks. At the side, you have a choice of 20 or 21 inch wheels. In this case, we have 21 inch on this car with 6-pot Brembo calipers in the front. I really like those little details over there. And of course the trident by the C-pillar. And back here, the tail lights have also been redesigned to look somewhat like a boomerang. And this, Maserati says, actually pays tribute to the 3200 GT from the 1990s, designed by Giugiaro. As for suspension, you've got double wishbones in the front, multi-links at the back, air springs, and also the skyhook dampers. So while we're at the back here, maybe I'll just show you the boot, which is about 580 liters. And then to close it, instead of it being here, as in most European cars, this is actually here. Quite convenient, I'd say, if you need to torture your kids to help load and unload items. In terms of dimensions, while it may look somewhat the size of a, for example, Porsche Macan, dimensions wise, it's actually longer with a longer wheelbase than a Porsche Cayenne. The exterior can be had in two different trims. So you have this Levante S as the base model, but you can also have it as the Levante S Grand Sport or Grand Lusso. Grand Sport will have a more menacing look. There will be more black darkened inserts, whereas the Grand Lusso will come with different design rims and also more chrome inserts for a more premium look as opposed to the menacing sinister look of the Grand Sport. All in all, even though it's been a look that's been around in Malaysia for a few years, I think it still looks so striking. I mean, look at the front end portion. Doesn't that look menacing and dramatic to you? Oh, check that interior out. You've got this red upholstery here. You've got some velvet suede material over here. You've got a clock, just like the Porsches, right on top of the dashboard. A whole lot of carbon fiber. And then all your drive controls here. Radio controls are actually here to set your suspension height. Now, let's give the engine a start. So This is the highlight of the interior, the new infotainment system with a somewhat new housing. If you compare the model from before, the screen actually looks like it's inside the dashboard, whereas this has a cleaner look, has a newer interface with new fonts, and I was told it actually matches the display and interface on the meter cluster. It's very intuitive to use, there are plenty of functions, everything that you need is right up here. But unlike some cars where they have the aircon controls purely in the infotainment system, this one actually has physical controls as well, which I really appreciate. Then you have sat-nav, which I found to be one of the most useful default sat-nav programs ever used. Phone connections, you have wireless Apple CarPlay, various other settings for the car. All in all, I think the display is really sharp, really crisp. As you can see, it's very reactive. It really adds a modern touch to the somewhat aging Maserati Levante. We've got more controls here for the boot, for the sunroof. And then when you really sit around and look at the car, it's just full of flair and drama. It's just very typical of an Italian car. It may have placed the boot button quite oddly over here as opposed to it being here. But that's the thing about Italian cars, they just do things differently, and I think in this day and age, being different, there is quite an appeal to it. Oh, before I forget, you get Bowers and Wilkins as well. Alright, now let's go check out the back seat. Frameless windows, I don't think I'll ever get bored of this look. For the back, we've got aircon controls here, fan speed, temperature. Also frameless windows, really cool. You get sunshades like the ones in the Cayenne, in the S-Class, where press it once, it lowers the sunshade. Press it again, it opens the windows. What a view though. Sadly, this is all you can open. But in terms of space, I gotta say, there is plenty of legroom. In terms of headroom, perhaps not as much as I would expect, not as much as I would want, partly because of the exterior design, that sloping rear roof that gives it such a dramatic look. I think if I were to go for something a little different, I should be able to compromise with that. As with all things, if you're trying to be different, there is always a trade-off if you ask me. Otherwise, check out the legroom, check out the headroom, and again, of course, this is all because it has bigger dimensions than even the Porsche Cayenne, even though it don't look that way on the outside. Before we drive, I'm just gonna show you a little more of the interior. More details over here. Oh, I just noticed if you press on this, it changes from kmh to miles per hour. Okay, and then when you scroll down, you get to see all these different parameters of the car. This is a 7-inch display, by the way, and as for this, the newer display is 8.4 inches. Oh, before I forget as well, as for this instrument cluster, compared to before where it had a lot of plastic covers over it and all, now it's a lot cleaner for a more elegant modern look with glass instead of plastic. Alright, so with that out of the way, let's do what we came to Langkawi to do. Enjoy the open roads, enjoy the 3-litre V6 twin turbo. So I've got the suspension in Sport. Not sure if you hear the exhaust clearer now. I'm gonna also put the suspension in Sport. Everything's a lot sharper, a lot more eager. Ooh. Driving out of the car park now, first impression, engine really smooth. But then again, V6s, let's see what it can do. Full throttle. Oh, do you hear that? Oh my goodness. That sounds fantastic. You do feel a little bit of the weight going through the turns. Then again, it's a 2-ton vehicle. Wow. You see why they call this the baby Ferrari SUV. It just has so much go. So you've got about 480 horsepower and 530 Newton meters of torque. 0 to 100, 5.2 seconds. That, whether it's the horsepower, the torque figures, is actually very, very similar to the Porsche Cayenne. You get an 8-speed automatic gearbox, but honestly, the way it shifts could have fooled me for a double clutch. I mean, I've been quite fortunate to drive the Cayenne, the Macan, the Urus, the Vela, the DBX, the F-Pace. All good cars in their own respect, but in terms of drama and flair, excitement even, I think this one is right up there. And it's almost like a car with two personalities. In sports mode, with suspension in sport, it feels almost like a supercar on stilts. In fact, it has the performance and performance figures to back it as well. But then, when you switch it off, you turn the suspension back to comfort, you put the drive back to normal, and it just becomes very docile. It's quiet in the cabin, it feels very relaxing, it's not intimidating, it's very easy to drive, and despite its dimensions, it actually does not feel as big as it looks on the outside from behind the wheel. So far, in the brief 1-2 hours that we've had in total driving this car, I've only noticed two things that bothered me just slightly. The ride, even though quite composed and stable, especially for a 2-ton vehicle, it's a bit busier than I would have preferred. You feel a lot of movement happening underneath your seat. And as for the seats, I wish padding was a little more accommodating. But aside from that, I mean, nothing wrong with the interiors in the German SUVs, the more powerful German SUVs, but they just do not look like this. I mean, carbon fiber everywhere, the design of the dashboard, stitching on the door panels, everything just makes it stand out just a little more from your German counterparts. As for the question on why you'd get this at about 800 over 1,000 over the Cayenne, which is around the same price, well, 3 years ago when I first drove the Maserati Levante in Italy, I said this, and I will use the analogy again. Buying the Porsche Cayenne or the Macan or the Range Rover Vela, the Jaguar F-Sport, to me personally, I feel it's kind of like buying a suit off the rack. Whereas with this Levante, with the way it looks, the flair that it has, and the fact that it's Italian, it feels like getting a custom-made Italian suit, having a old Italian man measure you, you know. It's just the entire process, the result, it's just really different. Personally, I think with the German SUVs, the Jaguars, the Land Rovers, they're more tactile, they're more subdued. Whereas with this, it just shouts at you. Every part of the car is somewhat telling you, hey, look at me, check me out. In terms of ability, I don't think the Levante is any inferior to its competitors of the same price. You've got power, it drives well, it looks great. As for the interior, it looks like the studio of a TikToker, and it carries 5, it's quiet, there's plenty of luggage room. Honestly, aside from the 2 criticisms that I mentioned earlier, perhaps the slightly lesser headroom at the back, having driven this car for 2 hours, that's all I can say about it. Oh, I'm so glad we have these empty roads this morning. It just keeps wanting to go, and the sound at the back is encouraging you further. It's so scary and exciting at the same time. Scary because it's, you know, it's not a small vehicle, but exciting as well because you're carrying so much speed, you're carrying so much weight. It really keeps you on your toes. In terms of driving though, it may have the performance to match the Cayenne, but in terms of intuitiveness, fluidity, I think I still have to give it to the Porsche. I think it's very much like comparing a Ferrari supercar and a Porsche. With the Ferrari, you kind of like have to manage it a bit, but with the Porsche, you can get in and drive straight away as if you have been driving it for the last 5 years. Oh, goodness. Did you hear that? Oh, that exhaust really cracks me up. In normal mode, you won't even realize it's there, but in sports mode, my goodness, the car instantly transforms. Even when you slow down and come to a stop, you just hear the exhaust note getting louder and it becomes more apparent. Strange. But that's the thing about Italian cars, isn't it? I mean, I'm no expert when it comes to that subject matter, but based on my experience and observation at least, they've always had something about them that just stands out a little bit more in terms of style, in terms of attitude even, I guess you can say. It just looks a little more rebellious. That's the word, rebellious. Whereas, you know, when you compare it with, I don't know, the Macan or the Cayenne, they just look so subdued, so clean. They don't look ugly, don't get me wrong, but when you compare it to the Levante, I think there's no competition, personally. I'm gonna spend a while more enjoying this car, but as for the video, that's all for now guys. I'll see you in the next one.